Across the country, road cones have spread like an orange pox. For many of us, the safety markers are an eyesore and a nuisance.
Kia ora, I'm Amanda Gillies, and today on The Detail, overzealous road cone use.
There are projects you see from time to time where there are 5,000 cones down a street and the side streets while someone's coming in to fix a leaking tap valve or something. And you just go, just stop it. This is madness.
And the war declared by the government.
What else does the government have a problem with? Road cones. So much so, they're proposing a hotline to dob in excessive use of road cones. Hello, is that the road cone police? Yeah, I'm on Gloucester Street, Christchurch, and they are everywhere.
Will there be like a rapid response unit or what?
I've had early conversations with WorkSafe about what we expect. There will be a 12-month pilot program of reducing over-compliance for road cones.
I think that the war on cones is unwinnable. It was like the war on drugs, right? Like, you are not going to beat the road cone. It is here forever. If you try to go up against this and make it your enemy, you will lose.
That was Newsroom political reporter and proud road cone apologist Fox Meyer. More from him soon. But first, Workplace Relations and Safety Minister Brooke Van Velden, who is leading the road cone war. She's launched that new reporting hotline, and she and National Minister Chris Bishop have been assigned to tackle the real issue of excessive cone use. The focus on cones is part of wider reforms of the country's health and safety laws and regulations. Here's Van Velden explaining the plans at the program launch alongside the Prime Minister.
And finally, these health and safety reforms could not be complete unless we do something about the road cones. I've travelled across the country to hear health and safety concerns, and at nearly every meeting, someone raised the issue of a sea of road cones. My colleague, Minister Bishop, is overseeing the NZTA side, which involves bedding in the new temporary traffic management guide to achieve a more efficient and risk-based approach. On the WorkSafe side, I'm going to direct WorkSafe to confirm and provide guidance on instances of road cone over-compliance. There will be a hotline for the public to report on excessive road cone use they may find out in the wild. Having WorkSafe focus on this will be a culture shift for the agency, but it signifies the broader direction this government is taking with the health and safety system.
Yeah, it's just symptomatic, frankly, of a country where we're just not getting things done or built. And just drive around on the weekends. You know, we drive around on weekends, we've got whole lanes shut down with cones everywhere when it doesn't need to be that way.
They make a valid point there about the humble but hated road cone, nicknamed the witch's hat. Well, they do seem to magically appear everywhere, but still there are critics of the road cone hotline. They are worried about the cost and that taking away the cones will make road workers' jobs less safe.
The cost of the road cones pilot will be funded through baselines that WorkSafe already have. But what I would say is this is a really important work program for WorkSafe. We know it's got a range of factors here. There is, unfortunately, a feeling and a sense in the community that road workers are annoying, that the road cones themselves are annoying. But we do want to reduce harm and make sure that people working on construction sites and working on our roads are safe. But at the moment, we're seeing so many road cones that there's a confusion as to the point of them.
Here's road cone reporter and fan Fox Meyer again.
At the end of the day, they are there for protection, right? Like, there are people behind those cones, and there's a reason that they're out there. And from my conversations with the traffic management industry, you know, I think they have similar feelings. I know that they believe that every single cone that is on the road should be serving a purpose, and they are bound by a code of practice, or at least they have been for the last 30 years, that dictates how they have to set these out. And that's not always, you know, fit for purpose in a given situation. And so I'm sure that the cone men and women that are distributing those little orange soldiers are thinking to themselves every now and then that this might be overzealous, to use the word of the day. But it's not their choice.
And it's all about safety. End of the day, it's all about safety, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
So he says the move by the government to introduce a tattle hotline to dob in excessive use has frustrated traffic management bosses who say the move primes the public to disregard basic safety measures. And he points out an industry steering group has already been working on a plan with changes to the code of practice to reduce the number of cones on roads.
A short history of it is that for 30 years there's been this code of practice, COPTM for Code of Practice for Temporary Traffic Management, that dictates how cones are deployed and also all other sort of signage, any of that sort of work area related things. There's basically this tome. It's this massive, huge thing. I've tried to read it and it's very, very difficult, and so I did not read it. But all the rules are dictated in there, and it's been pretty much the same for 30 years. And so a review was launched with this industry steering group in April of 2023, I believe, to come together and basically reassess this. And one of the changes that was going to come out of this was that road cones and traffic management was going to be able to be decided upon what's the most appropriate usage for a given site by the people who are on that site. And so this could lead to a situation where if you're doing work in a cul-de-sac, you do not need to put out cones as if you were doing work on State Highway 1. Because otherwise there's sort of a broad brush approach taken. And that's when people get frustrated. You come home to your street and you see, like 120 cones out for who knows what work is actually going on. And that's a consequence of the fact that we have these broad brush regime. And so these specific changes were coming. And so they've started to roll out in a few areas as part of this pilot program. And then at the same time, Van Velden has gotten up and announced this road cone hotline for the public to call and dob in basically what they deem to be overzealous use of road cones, which is a bit strange when you think about the timing, because the goal that she has and that the industry has and that the public has is to make sure that we are not excessively using road cones. So everybody's on the same page about this. And so a solution had been formed and progress was being made, but now we have this hotline that puts the power of determining what necessary road cone use is in the hands of the public, who are already primed to not like road cones and are now empowered to take that sort of into their own vigilante hands to determine when the traffic industry is right or not. And I just feel like it's quite counterproductive. Like if you have road users out there, like the people that the cones are out there to protect, the biggest risk to them is road users. And so those road users need to be as careful as possible. And if we are, as a society are adhering to road cone usage, if we've decided that cones are going to be the first line of defense, then we need to not undermine our understanding of cones.
Why do you think the government came out now?
Well, I think it sounds good, honestly. I think it's just, at any point, if you want to get the public behind you, you can just say, I'm going to tackle the road cone thing, and everyone will go, yeah, that's a great idea. It's a common enemy, and I don't think it should be. I think it should be a common friend, but that's, perhaps a controversial statement. But yeah, I think it's seen as a quick win, and as long as that's the case, then I will be here to be an advocate for the road cones and say, please don't attack this native population of road cones that we have, because it does do something important and special for us at the end of the day, and I don't think it helps anybody to demean them.
Just with traffic management, the industry leaders there, when they first heard of this hotline, what was their instant, immediate reaction?
I think it would be frustration. I wasn't like in the room when they got the call sort of thing, but on my calls with them, they were frustrated. They've spent a lot of time working on a solution to exactly this problem, and to have the power to define what's necessary in that space taken out of their hands and put into the public's hands, who's already primed to see this as a bad thing, it's got to be frustrating, right? If you work on anything for long enough and then somebody comes in and says, cool, thank you for that, I'm going to take this other population that doesn't like you and let them decide the rules here, or at least critique your performance, that's gotta hurt. I don't imagine that was a fun headline to see.
And road workers know there is a valid reason for road cones.
Of course, safety for road workers must be paramount. There are 10 deaths per year among road workers and 30 serious injury accidents. Way too many.
But their concerns with this announcement, I think, are twofold. First of all, that it puts workers' lives or well-being in danger, and whether that's a substantial threat to life or, even something, with scare quotes here, as small as workplace harassment by the public, either way, there's an increased risk to the people on the ground. But on the other side, there's a risk to general compliance, right? Because the more that we talk about this war on cones thing and the more that we vilify that symbol, the less we comply with it. You see them out there and you're no longer primed to take it seriously. You're primed and empowered to say, actually, maybe I can decide if that's necessary or not. And that, that directly impacts how you operate on the road. And so I think there's two risks there. There's a risk to the workers themselves, and there's a risk to just general traffic compliance, which, at the end of the day is a substantial risk. I can't think of very many more obviously dangerous places to work than on a road.
They do get abuse from members of the public because there's a confusion about why are people seeing so many road cones. Part of this is we want to reduce the cost to business and getting things built in our economy. This will deliver on that. But secondly, it's really important that people understand the purpose of a road cone is actually to keep themselves safe from a construction site, and it's also to keep the workers safe.
The Minister talked about the abuse that was being fired at road workers as it is. Do you think that's just going to inflame it now? It's going to be a free-for-all. People think, oh, well, the government's on our side.
I mean, I could absolutely see how that would happen. You'd feel like you sort of have a hall pass to make fun of this. That's the vibe I got from it. And why do that, right? Like, these people are working in areas of critical risk. There's cars going by. There's all sorts of accidents that could happen. Van Velden's whole thing with this workplace health and safety thing was, we don't want to worry so much about the little things that people can use common sense to get around. We want to worry about the critical risks, serious injuries, deaths. What industry, like, if road work doesn't fall into that category, what does? That seems like exactly the type of critical risk that we should be worried about. And, like it or not, as a nation, we've decided that our approach to traffic management is going to be cones. Other countries do different things. They have, more cameras per se, or more enforcement police things, or they use bollards instead of cones, or they use lights and stoppage, stuff like that. We've decided on road cones. So either we switch as a nation, which would take, a pretty big national effort to redefine how we, like, our immediate association of what road safety looks like. It's possible, but it's probably easier to just, look at the road cone issue a bit more carefully. And it's certainly not helpful to undermine our understanding of what the symbol of road safety is.
Exact road cone data is hard to come by. Waka Kotahi doesn't hold information on the number of road cones currently being used on our roads. Various contractors and subcontractors do the traffic management.
Unjustifiable disruption is how Auckland's mayor has labelled road cones dotted through the city. The number of road cones used, he says, is excessive and unnecessary.
But are they taking them, Mickey? Do they accept that perhaps there are too many out there and that perhaps, yes, they could use fewer cones to do the same job?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course. I don't imagine they enjoy putting out as many as they do sometimes. Sometimes that can... It does seem a bit excessive. And I also think, at the end of the day, they're very aware that this is what public sentiment is. And I think that they would be very eager to help address that and to be shown to be actively listening and making changes to reduce conage. I think that it's front of mind for people in this industry. And I think to paint the road cone industry as one that is intentionally excessive or somehow taking advantage of the cost of road cones is a bit ridiculous.
Speaking of cost, does anyone have any idea how much money has been spent on road cones and traffic management, at all over the past few years? And do we sort of have any idea how many cones have been out on our roads?
I have been looking for this number for years. Seriously, years. I think it's really difficult to figure out the true cost or the true population of endemic cones that we have.
But fair to say, a lot. And in fairness, a lot of people are welcoming the government's new hotline to dob them in.
So if you're pissed off at road cones, get on the blower and say, look, remove them if they looked as though they're serving no purpose. I've got to say, they drive me nuts, and I look for the work going on around them and I very rarely see it.
No,
so
never there.
I like that idea.
If you do call the hotline, do we know yet what's going to happen?
I don't really think we do. I mean, we can make some guesses, and I'm very excited to see the data on this, but I imagine what would happen is you'd call it, the report would be lodged, you'd have to go to the council, they'd have to assess the report and then maybe visit the site and monitor compliance with it. Either way, no matter how this shakes out, there's going to be several steps. It's not going to be like you call it and they send out a crack team in a squad car to go clean up the road cones in the next hour. That's not going to happen. But whatever way this
You've made me very disappointed, Fox, that is not happening.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know what the price tag would be on the road cone, squad car crack team, but I could consider a career shift to defend against that if that's what it turns out to be. But point being, the amount of time that it will take for the gears of cone bureaucracy to churn, is that going to be more or less than the time it takes to finish the work on the site? Because how often are we going to end up in a situation where they finally go out there to go assess the road cones and the site is empty because the construction is done? And at that point, how much time and money have we wasted on what feels to me like a feel-good exercise for people who are pissed off about road cones to get it off their chest? If you really just want to rant about road cones, you can just call me instead of putting it on the taxpayer's dime, and I'll hear it out. And I feel like maybe that's how we solve this problem.
He's a brave man, because Kiwis haven't been afraid to call talkback or talk to journalists about the humble road cone, forever a topic to get them hot under the collar.
I know the road cones might seem trivial, but to me, I've always thought they were a metaphor for excessive spending and over-rigorous regulation.
Well, it seems everyone loves to hate the orange witches' hats, cones that line many Auckland streets.
I made the comment that somebody must be making a lot of money out of these things. Well, I think there's an overuse of them, to be perfectly honest.
There's more and more and more, and it's just a nice cash cow for the road cone people and the construction workers.
Somebody did make a joke to me once about buying shares in the road cones many years ago, and you'd probably be quite rich by now.
Oh, I think they must be getting paid by the number they put out.
Forget sheep. We're becoming a country with more road cones than people.
I think it's just part of Auckland. They're everywhere always.
What I find so weird is our obsession in this country for the road cone. Our hatred, we get so wild. Have you ever seen anything like this?
No, I think that it is quite bizarre. It's one of the first things that I noticed when I came here from overseas years ago was, well, first I noticed that there were palm trees and pine trees in the same area, and then literally the very next thing I noticed was, why the heck are there road cones everywhere? I've never seen this many in my life. It's super bizarre. And, I think that a consequence of that is that people have strong feelings about them. And once something, once the ball is rolling on something like this in society, I think it's hard to stop it. But I would say that it's potentially misplaced. I don't think that we should hate road cones. I think that doesn't help anybody. I'm a road cone apologist, and I will back the road cones any day of the week.
Actually, it turns out he's not alone. For all the road cone hate and judgment, many New Zealanders also quite like their witch's hat. Perhaps too much, with many, disappearing from construction sites and roadsides.
New Zealand produces some 80,000 road cones every year, count them up, but 3 times that amount are imported as well. So where the hell do they all go? A surprising number can be found in back gardens and garages around New Zealand. We're like road cone hoarders.
Foxmeyer, have you ever stolen a road cone?
I mean, I went to university in Dunedin for several years, so I think that speaks for itself.
How many at its peak do you think you had at your flat?
How many in my flat at its peak? Probably 2, to be honest, because, they rotate out. We do put them back, I would say. Some people, there's this excellent collection of Dunedin road cones that are very delicately painted. There were SpongeBob characters, I think. A lot of artistry went into this. But I was never a cone keeper. I would return my cones, and I would advise those with cone collections at home to do the same. There should be an amnesty program for this. You're not going to get in trouble, but at the end of the day, they are property. It's a fun gag, but somebody does pay for that, and it's part of this whole conversation.
For the record, I have never actually stolen one or drunk out of one. Yep, that's another favoured uni trick. And once the hotline and code of practice changes come into effect, maybe there will be fewer opportunities for this to happen.
Road cones are, in fact, in the gun.
Is this a win, do you think, for the government? Are the public going to love them for this?
Well, we'll see if it works, right? But if it is for the government, remember this was started in 2023, so it's this is an industry sort of led thing from my perspective. But I also think that this will be a quixotic task. I think that the war on cones is unwinnable. It was like the war on drugs, right? Like, you are not going to beat the road cone. It is here forever. If you try to go up against this and make it your enemy, you will lose. Because as long as there's road cones out there, people are going to be upset about it. So I think it's a massive mistake to tee up against them and pretend like you're going to be able to actually rid them from the environment. It's just not going to happen. And at the end of the day, the more that we do that, the more that we facilitate this rhetoric that this is a battle between two sides, when it isn't. Those road cones are out there because somebody's doing work. The work's being done because you want development here. If you don't want that many road cones, then change the procedures around them, and that's exactly what we're doing. So I think it's inflaming rhetoric that we really don't need, and it doesn't benefit anybody, even if it is kind of fun to talk about.
That's all for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. Thank you to Fox Meyer. This episode was produced by Gwen McClure and engineered by William Saunders. I'm Amanda Gillies. Mā te wā.